you can thank everybody for their patience.
Okay, we're good to go.
All right, well, sorry we're getting started a little late here, people. Thanks for being patient with us. And welcome to our chat on bullying in schools around Kitsap County. Last week, Chris Henry did a two-part series on bullying in schools and what those schools are doing to head off bullying, as well as what some of the parents are doing to advocate for their children and to help them through bullying when it happens. And so here tonight we have Chris Henry of the Kitsap Sun, as well as the Sedgwick Junior High school counselor, Annie Kontos, here to answer questions, and they're going to talk a little bit about bullying in local schools. And just a heads up for everyone before we start, we aren't going to address any specific instances of bullying or allegations with individuals, but we're talking about general advice and resources people can have. And so if you're wanting to look at Chris Henry's stories, there is a link in the chat that our editor has provided for you, and you can take a look at that and read through it. Also, if you have any questions during the conversation, feel free to jump in and ask those questions in the chat. We are watching it, and we do want to answer your questions. So before we get started, though, we want to kind of know who's in the audience tonight. So we're going to give you a poll, and let us know if you're a parent or a student or an educator or someone else who's just interested in the conversation. And while that's going on, Chris can talk a little bit of how big of a problem is school bullying in local schools.
Great. Well, thanks, Rachel. And yeah, according to the Kitsap Healthy Youth Survey, 31% of 8th graders in Kitsap County said in 2014. 29% of 6th graders said they've been bullied. So that's just an example. There were reports on other grades, but it did say that the bullying was more prevalent in middle school, and this is one of the reasons why we've invited Annie Kontos here tonight. And the other thing that the survey said is that students who are bullied have more trouble in school, so it's really a big source of concern for schools. Annie, you got any thoughts on this? How big of a problem is this?
The problem that we have is that a lot of the kids are not comfortable coming forward to the adults to share their feelings about bullying. So we hear about bullying from the students who observe it. That's very important, that we have students that are reporting what they see going on. And then they're even often reluctant to give names. So there's a fear among adolescents. You know, they don't want to be labeled a snitch. And so it's our job to provide a safe place where they're comfortable and they know that we do our best to protect the identities of the students that give us information. We just try to be really good listeners and try to really watch what's going on.
And on that note, it looks like polls have come in. We don't have too many people participating quite yet. People kind of jump in and out of the conversation in the chat whenever they're available. But it looks like we have a couple educators who are kind of observing. And so I guess even though it's just educators we have so far, I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in and let us know if they've personally experienced bullying in schools or if they've witnessed it. And so we can have a poll about that and let us know your thoughts. But Chris also has some more information on how prevalent number-wise bullying is.
Right. Schools have to report to the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction about bullying incidents that result in suspension or expulsion. And last year there were 170 of those incidences in Kitsap and Mason County, North Mason schools, pardon me. And that may not sound like much considering there are nearly that whole area, but the reality is that bullying that doesn't rise to that level, there's a lot of it going on in schools, and you tell me if you would agree with that, that this is sort of the tip of the iceberg of not only bullying but other types of peer-to-peer behavior that schools are really concerned about. Anything that you'd like to add on that, Annie?
Yeah, so we really try to clarify with students that what bullying is that it's prolonged over a period of time. There's an imbalance of power where, one student is, doing their best to make the other student feel powerless. The problem that I see more in adolescence is just a feeling of not fitting in, not belonging, grieving. A lot of times I hear that, where the friends that they had in elementary school have kind of drifted away, and they're just no longer feeling accepted and liked by that peer group that they were always really comfortable with before. So, when I think of bullying, the true meaning of the word is that somebody's been picking on that I'm not aware of as much, but the kids tell me that it is going on. So that's what I was saying. We do have a difficult time.
I'm losing your little...
Yes, and who are they doing it to? It's more, what we deal with more is helping kids discover who they really are, of friendships that aren't there anymore, how to form new ones.
And on it as well that you hear about extreme bullying cases,
Right.
but there are also instances where kids do things that perhaps aren't appropriate, or kind of nipping that in the
Right.
bud and just practicing good manners and how to interact with people, because middle schoolers are kind of awkward age and figuring
Things that we're doing. If you've ever heard of Rachel's Challenge, Rachel, unfortunately, was one of the children who died in. It turns out was a remarkable young lady who had written a lot of inspirational thoughts out to help the underdog, to just do small random acts of kindness. And there are many stories of Rachel who and helped them and was kind to them. So we've had assemblies for a few years where people who were story, they tell about Rachel. It's a very moving assembly. Usually there's not a dry eye in the place, but other kids to practice positive gossip. That's one. And so we have a club at Sedgwick called try to spread the good word about practicing positive gossip, finding small ways to do just small acts of kindness in reaction. And so now in our school we have chains hanging up in our student area where every student has made a link of chain reaction of small acts of kindness. So I think there's a real move now in the schools, not that we don't talk about bullying, things and looking for somebody who needs help, looking for that person who's sitting alone and sitting with them.
And also on that, I know, Chris, you've looked into kind of along the lines, what's technically bullying and the definition of that, and what states are doing to define that. And I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Right, and I think Annie touched on that a little bit earlier about, I think the real key point is the dynamic of the power differential. And, when kids are having a dispute, say, over, who gets to throw the basketball first, and it's an even playing field, and they might be unhappy with each other, it's not necessarily bullying. And sometimes one thing that I found, speaking to all these school safety experts, was that there is a tendency, because of the heightened, it's totally appropriate, but there's a tendency on the part of parents and students and sometimes educators to say, well, everything's bullying, and then it just goes right to the extreme. And a couple of things happen there. One, kids need to be able to work out these low-level peer-to-peer conflicts themselves. And this, maybe we can talk about your peer mediator program in a minute. They need to be able to work this stuff out themselves. And parents can teach them to do that, and schools can teach them to do that. But the other thing is that if we paint everything with a broad brush and everything is bullying, this is what I've heard from experts, then the real incidents of bullying that need attention can sometimes go missed or unaddressed. So it's really important to be able to see the whole spectrum and know what the appropriate response is. Annie, you're nodding your head. You want to join in on that?
Right. I think a lot of times it does not rise to the true definition of bullying. And many times what we're doing in the schools is teaching kids, number one, and tells me something unkind that another person does. We talk about that was really mean, that was really hurtful, but also having compassion for the person who did or said that hurtful thing. I say to kids, a person who is happy in life is not mean. If somebody is mean or hurtful, it's because there's something wrong. And you may not know about that and realizing that if somebody's hurting you, it's because they're hurting. The answer is not to lash out at that other person and think and stop and do the best you can to get away from that situation. Another thing I really try to teach kids is to have a sense of humor, to learn how to joke, how to kind of bring things down a couple notches when it feels like unkind, the teasing's getting a little mean, how to make a joke that is the joke, and you laugh, ha ha ha. A lot of times that just kind of deflects the attention enough that you can get away. You're going to go but just getting away from those kids and not being seen as somebody who has a pity party easily in front of others. Pity party needs to happen in private.
Yeah, and kind of on that note of trying to figure out what's bullying and how to react from that, I've asked some of our readers to maybe take a quiz on what they see as bullying. We'll kind of give an example and see if you consider that bullying or not. We're kind of on that same track of talking with kids. What kind of conflicts do arise? What's a common conflict that junior high schoolers have?
The most common thing that I hear is kids getting made fun of. And I'm able to sit there and say, you see this curly hair? I was made fun of a lot about my curly hair. So a lot of times, they're made fun of because they're too tall, they're too short, they're fat, they're skinny, they have acne, they're nerdy, they're not cool. They're just kind of getting teased. And people are looking for buttons to push They're trying to figure out, you know, where can I get a rise out of you? So that's something I say to kids is that's what they want, is a rise out of you. They want you to get upset. So you're just playing right into their game when you take the bait and get upset. You can't do this by just thinking it through and thinking, okay, so next time I'm not going to get upset. You know, I tell the kids, this is something that you need to practice. You need to practice at home and have somebody, you know, pretend that they're making fun of you. Come up with some things you can say back ahead of time so that you've practiced this. And again, what you say back should not be a back at you kind of comment. If you're saying, you know, well, that's what you are, but what am I, the fight is going to continue. But if you can joke and say, you know, like my dad taught me to say, I know I shouldn't have stuck my finger in the electric socket this morning about my hair, so that I'm making the joke on myself and I'm laughing, and then see ya, you know, move on and go find people who are nice to you.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to take a little sidetrack here because when they were talking about bystanders on this stopbullying.gov, which is a wonderful website, they said that the bystanders actually can nip, you know, kind of nip it in the bud by creating a distraction, and you know, whatever's happening, you might just say to the person who's being bullied, oh, hey, look what's going on over at the monkey bars, let's go do it over here, you know. And so it's you know, it's just a gentle distraction. Anyway, what you said reminded me of that. So Annie, are there things that, you know, you mentioned practicing this at home, are there other things that you recommend that parents do to kind of get their kids ready to deal with the everyday stuff as well as the bigger bullying stuff?
You know, and I do think that having fun family conversations where there's joking and laughter, you know, learning how to go with it is we learn that at home. We learn, you know, we get teased and made fun of at home. Learning how to just let that roll off your shoulder and laugh about it, that's an important skill. If everything is this big, heavy, serious conversation, all right, children, tonight we're going to talk about bullying and what you can do about it, you know, that's really not preparing kids very well. It's setting them up that this bad thing is going to happen and you should be really concerned about it. I do think that parents need to really listen. I think, you know, our families are so busy, everybody's running around in all these activities. We get home, we've got to get the dinner on and cleaned up, get the, you know, chores, and there's not a lot of sometimes just sitting and being still and just being together and listening. I know with my own children, there were times that, and they're adults now, but there were times that if I would just sit, which isn't my nature, if I would just sit and be quiet and just sit there, that's when sometimes, you know, they would start to talk about their concerns. And it took some just being quiet, being patient, and just letting them talk without jumping in real quick with, well, here's what you should do about that. You know, just letting them talk. That is when you can find out if something is really bothering them, and if it's not just something that happened today, but if it's kind of a pattern that they're often feeling unhappy.
Right. And, you know, you probably deal with this at school, teaching kids how to navigate that kind of gray area between, you know, being able to address bullying on their own and when to go get help. Do you have any advice about that parents can share with their kids so that message can be reinforced? How do you figure out what's safe and what's not safe?
Well, I tell the kids that do come forward, you know, you're doing the right thing, because many times what's really going on is more like a puzzle. there's a lot of little pieces to this puzzle. And the adults in the school are keeping track of all of those little pieces of the puzzle. So it's really important to come forward and tell us about that. You know, and I know sometimes the kids are kind of apologetic and they'll say, you know, I know this may not seem like a big deal, but I've kind of noticed lately, you know, that this one dude, you know, he just keeps on picking on this other guy. And you know, and then I'll say, well, what kind of stuff does he do? What kind of stuff does he say? And, well, you know, and they're always reluctant because they don't want to get anybody in trouble. So, you know, just kind of reassuring them that that's not what this is about. This isn't about getting somebody in trouble. This is about, you know, making school a safer place. You guys all have a right, you know, to be here. You should be relaxed. You should be having fun. And so if you come forward and tell us about these little patterns that you see that are making it uncomfortable for somebody else, you know, the thing that you keep saying, nip it in the bud, that is what we try to do. We try to get in there and intervene and help the kids communicate better, maybe keep them apart if there's some that just are not getting along with each other. I mean, we've even changed class schedules to keep, you know, if there's two that are just really having a problem with each other, we'll change schedules to kind of bring that situation down.
Right, and I wanted to, you know, kind of be sure that we talked about this with parents, how they might recognize that their child is being bullied. This is, you know, the serious stuff that's going on. What kind of signs would they look for?
Well, you know, and I think what's so confusing for parents of adolescents, when we say watch for changes, well, adolescents are changing, you know, so it is hard for the parent to know, so this anxiety that I'm seeing or this sadness that I'm seeing all the time, is this because my kid is unhappy because of something that's happening at school? Or is my child going through adolescence? So again, I think it's really important to listen. You know, you need to have some times, you know, at least a couple times a week, where there's just sort of quiet being there time. It's not, we're not racing somewhere and getting all these things done. I really do think listening to what your kids are saying. I see the list here that we have, you know, warning signs that your child may be experiencing bullying, and a lot of these are warning signs that your child is an adolescent. So, but yeah, it's stomach aches and headaches, reluctance, refusal to attend school, irritability, you know, all of those things, being isolated from everybody, those are signs that something isn't right. You know, yes, your child is an adolescent, but they also need to be with the family. They need to be able to, again, laugh and have some fun. If your child is showing these signs of being unhappy or sad or anxious, I wouldn't jump to the bullying conclusion. You know, there could be a lot of reasons for that.
Does that kind of go back to the to the sitting and waiting and listening?
Yes, listening. I mean, I've had, I can't tell you how many times this spring I've had just these little boys, I call them little boys, 7th or 8th grade boys, who seem very, very sad and depressed and almost unable to speak. And it turns out, guess what? They're in love.
Oh.
That's what it is. You know, finally, when we can finally, you know, get to the bottom of it. So I think it's important to listen, and I think it's important to be around your child should have some friends. That's another thing. If your child doesn't seem to have any friends, you know, when they have time on a Saturday to hang out, you know, those, you should be seeing who those kids are. And if there's never anybody that they're hanging out with, that would be something to, you know, investigate. Well, who's nice to you? Who are your friends? well, do you have their phone numbers? Maybe can we have a skating party or something, or have them over for a campfire? I think it's really important to be with your kids and with their friends and to see what goes on. Some of the kids that I see that I'm very concerned about are the kids where everybody in that group is attractive and cool. As a parent, I would be a little concerned about that. You know, I would rather see a mixture of all different kinds of kids hanging out with my child, you know, not just the cool ones.
Right.
And
Yeah.
on that note, would that be a concern or something to watch for?
I guess I would say so. You know, it seems like all of your friends are what I would call cool and popular. You know, so is that pretty much? You know, tell me about your friends. I think, you know, coming to the school and seeing what goes on. We see that in the cafeteria. You know, you can look around in the cafeteria and you can see, you know, where the cool table is. You know, where the 7th grade super intelligent kids sit. You know, there's definitely groups of kids, and when a child does feel like they've been rejected by their old friends, because I do hear that one a lot, I encourage them, your assignment when you go into the cafeteria is to look for somebody who, you know, kind of isn't really sitting with a lot of other kids and having fun and laughing. Go sit with that kid and see if you have something in common. Make new friends.
And
Okay.
we've been talking a lot
And how
about
about it? Go ahead, Rachel.
we've been talking a lot about watching for warning signs of your child being bullied. But are there warning signs of your child being a bully? Like, what do you watch for in that?
Right, and that's what I was getting at about, you know, watching who your child hangs out with. You know, I don't really believe that adolescents should have much privacy. I don't think that they should be allowed to talk on their cell phone in their bedroom and be on the computer in their bedroom, because it's by listening to our children that we find out what's going on. That computer should not be, you know, their private domain. You can see what's going on by looking at their computer screen, by reading their cell phone, by listening to their conversations with other friends. You know, if I heard my child, you know, putting down people on the cell phone or on the internet, there would be consequences for that. That's not okay, you know. But what I do see is there's quite a few kids who seem to have that private access to their cell phone and Facebook and Instagram and these different social media, and I'm not sure sometimes that it's being monitored. I do hear from kids about, you know, mean things that are being posted on Facebook and Instagram, and it just hurts me, because I feel like, you know, where are the parents? Why isn't somebody watching this? And I know that my own kids are listening to this and saying, yeah, my mom sure didn't give us privacy. I used to stand behind them when they were on the computer, and they didn't like that. But you don't have privacy until you're an adult.
Yeah,
That's
and I had a thought about this, the social media as well, because I asked several people about it for this article. And, you know, one thing that kind of came out is that you give them age-appropriate freedom on social media, and you monitor it the same way you would if they were going to the mall or on a date or whatever. It's kind of like, you know, where are you going on social media? Who are you hanging out with? What's your purpose? And, you know, while social media is blamed for a lot, I actually spoke to one state official he's actually the head of school safety for OSPI, and he said that the vast majority of what goes on social media really is that kids do is really very fine and creative and whatnot, but there is the potential for rumors to spread so much faster, and for some egregious stuff to happen. But it's not the fault of social media per se. It's just that it spreads faster. It's like a virus or whatever. But my point is that parents should monitor their kids sort of age appropriate and give them more and more freedom as they get older. So those are my thoughts on that.
Well, another exciting thing that we have coming up, we have the Taproot Theater, which is a theater group in Seattle, coming out to Sedgwick in May, and they are performing a play for our students called Relationship Status. And it's all about friendship and gossip and rumors and then posting something on the internet. That's about all I know so far, but the kids are really excited about it. Our Rachel's Challenge kids asked for an assembly, and this is what we came up with. So we're hoping that it's going to get some conversations started about safety and you know, I always say to kids, sleep on it before you click, before you hit send, you know, sleep on it. Wait till the next day. And again, another thing that we say to kids is, would it be okay if your mom read that?
Gotcha. Yeah. I did want to just jump back to this list about, you know, how do you recognize if your kid is being a bully? Right. And again, I'm just drawing this straight from you know, stopbullying.gov. And, you know, it may not necessarily be bullying, but it would be a red flag if you saw a cluster of these behaviors that you know, your child is getting into physical or verbal fights a lot, if they have friends who are known bullies or who are bullies. If your child is increasingly aggressive or making more trips to the principal's office, I mean, just that's a red flag, and you have to just not have blinders on and not just rule out that it might be bullying. Especially kids, you know, if they don't accept responsibility for their own behaviors, that's a big red flag. So as a parent, you just have to kind of, you know, eyes wide open, say, okay. So I just wanted to add that. Did we have any questions from the audience yet?
I think they might still be thinking about things, but hopefully they'll come to us with questions. And I guess
we did have one earlier, Rachel, on Facebook that I wanted to ask about and let Annie address that. People were discussing kind of the difficulty with playgrounds and hallways and whatnot. I mean, the classroom is one thing, but they were saying, like, it seems like the common areas are a real problem. So, you know, how does your school go about addressing those areas?
So when our students have lunch, there are times that it's my job to go out and monitor what's going on. It's interesting. The adolescent is just kind of a naturally, they're going to see where those boundaries are, and they're going to push against those boundaries. That is their job when they're adolescents, is to challenge the limits. So it's just interesting to watch them. You know, if they find out they're not supposed to be walking in a certain area, they're trying to sneak into that area. You know, it's just, you have to just kind of laugh about it and don't push them into a corner. So I'm very careful when I speak to kids that are sort of trying to get away with something to laugh and joke and give them a graceful way out, not be too confrontive. We are trying to watch all the time, but you know, the kids tell me things that go on at school that we don't see. We really do rely upon the kids to take care of each other and to keep each other safe, because our eyes can't be everywhere. We try. I think that and like Rachel's Challenge, the peer mediators, which we haven't talked about yet, those are students that we have recruited who volunteer, and they're trained through the Kitsap Dispute Resolution Center, which is a center that serves adults who are hoping to avoid legal procedures, hoping to avoid going before a judge. So the Kitsap Dispute Resolution Center mediates conflict and does so in a way that both parties listen to each other. Many times conflict is caused by a misunderstanding, and people really haven't been listening to each other. So right now our peer mediators who are trained in conflict resolution are trying to find cases where there's an old relationship that used to be good. There's a friendship that used to be there, and one or both parties are sad now that that friendship is no more, and many times that's because of a misunderstanding. So if we can listen to each other and try to understand that we're all fighting battles, we all have hidden battles going on inside of us, and everybody's hurting in one way or another. So having compassion for one another.
Do you ever have cases where, and I know you did this at the elementary school, but where peers were actually able to resolve an instance of true bullying? Do you refer that to the peer mediators?
Yeah, even at the elementary school, if it was true bullying where it was a persistent, ongoing problem and we had a power imbalance, that would not be a peer mediator situation. If it's true bullying, adult intervention is needed. And in the cases of true bullying, what we're trying to do, first of all, like I said, is have compassion for all parties. And so the person who is trying to have more power over the other person, they need help. They need us to, teach them the appropriate way to make friends, the appropriate way to get others to laugh, because a lot of times they are doing it for the entertainment value, and really being caring with them about trying to find out what is really wrong. Because if somebody is chronically bullying, there is something wrong. That is not the sign of a healthy, well-adjusted person. And by the way, if you hear the school use the word bully regarding your child, and we would never call a child a bully, but we might say, we suspect that there's some bullying going on. If you hear that word, we are so reluctant to use that word because nobody wants to hear that word about their child. So if we've actually now started to use that word, that means there's been a long pattern and there's been a lot going on before we finally said the B word. We've tried to intervene, we've tried to work with everybody.
So I get you that you don't want to label the kid that, okay, he's a bully, therefore for the rest of his life he will be a bully. You're talking about the behavior and not the child, and that the child really needs help. Couple of things I wanted to touch on, because I know that we're running out of time here. I just wanted to quickly do a blog post called Resources for Parents about bullying, and it talks about the steps to take if you believe your child is being bullied at school. And basically there's a chain of command. You go and talk to the teacher or the playground attendant. If you still feel like it's a problem, then you would go to a school counselor, or next step up, the principal. And if that doesn't work, you still got questions, you go to the administrator at your district's office, who is the district's compliance officer, and this is somebody appointed by OSPI to ensure that discipline is handled properly. On the blog that we have a link to, and it should be with the package there. Hopefully you can find it. If not, if anybody has any questions, and we'll get back to the chat in a minute, but I just wanted to give you my email. It's chenry@kitsapsun.com. So email me with your questions. about, the steps to take, and we have some resources there as well. Okay, so that was my 30-second advertisement. The other thing I really wanted to talk about was bystanders, the role of bystanders and the power of bystanders to de-escalate a situation. Can you speak to that, Annie?
Before we do, actually, Chris, I have a quick question. I'm not a parent, but we were talking about the resources and the steps to go through with bullying. So I just want to make sure it's clear. The recommended action then would be to go through the school. I mean, is it recommended that parents approach other parents? Like, what's appropriate and what's not in this situation for parents, and how to handle that?
Yeah, it depends on the relationship between the parents. So again, no one wants to hear your child is a bully. And so if you were to approach another parent and say that, now you've got a conflict. So I think it's probably, unless you're pretty comfortable and know that parent pretty well, if the bullying that you suspect is going on at school, the best step is to first of all, approach the adult that is closest to that situation. It's usually the teacher. At least in South Kitsap, all of our schools have a counselor, so that's a good starting point. The counselor can investigate and find out what's really going on. And when we investigate, we usually do try to find out about the bystanders. The bystanders, we say witnesses. Did you have any witnesses? And those kids that were nearby and saw that are very important. Most of the time, bullying is for entertainment value. And so if other kids are hanging around and watching it for today's show of the week, they are just as guilty as the one who's doing the unkind behavior, because they're providing the audience. So the most effective thing that kids can do if they see somebody being mean is get the victim out of there, get out of there. But when you leave, take the victim with you. Don't just leave that poor kid there to put up with that. Find a way to, as we said earlier, change the subject, make a joke, and get that person away from that situation. Do not provide an audience.
If you feel you can do it safely.
Right.
You got to make sure it's safe. I mean, if there's a huge fight going on, the child has to use his or her judgment, right? And most of the time, if you can just get over where you're closer to an adult, everything's going to die down. So, the adults can't be everywhere, but, I've had kids actually move over close to me and say, yeah, hi, Mrs. Kontos, I'm talking to you because I just didn't like where that conversation was headed, So, oh, that's why you're talking to me, okay.
Yeah, and, I mean, we've talked a lot about, physical bullying or teasing in person, but we've also talked a little bit about watching kids on social media. Do you find more complaints about people being teased on social media for school, or what are the complaints you're hearing? Are they in person?
Yeah, and again, it depends. You were saying earlier, Chris, the majority of kids on social media are not bullying, and they are, using it okay. But there are certain kids that tell me that there are certain people that are just sort of chronically unkind on social media. And so, why are you looking at that page? Why are you connected to that person on social media? I mean, I do talk to kids a lot about that it's like you're just eating poison, and it's poisoning your mind, it's poisoning your spirit. Choose to be around positivity and choose to be around kindness. It's not that hard to find. If you look around, the majority of kids are positive and kind.
So what do you think, this is kind of a change of subject here, did you have any more questions on that, Rachel?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Annie, what can parents do to help promote a culture of kindness in schools and to help kind of extinguish bullying really specifically? And I'm going to say what I learned is that school officials are telling me that they really want the parents to come to them, but they want them to come in partnership, not, with the advance idea that, the school is working against them in some way or whatever. It's more constructive if parents can come with the idea, knowing there's a chain of command.
At our school that come and help out with things. We just had a dance last Friday, and there were parents there, and wow, that was the greatest thing to see. Out on the dance floor, it's no longer girls standing around waiting for boys to ask them to dance like it was in my day. The kids are in groups, and they're just mixed, and they're just dancing with each other and having fun. There were also other activities going on besides the dance aspect of it. There was a movie they could see, and there was food, of course, and there were a lot of parents there. So I think it's important for the parents to be at the school and to be there for positive events like that. That's the best thing you can do, is set an example for your child that you know how to have fun, and that you go out of your way to be kind to others, and that you're not just being kind to the ones that it's easy to be kind to, that you're being kind to all different kinds of people, old people and people that are different from your family. That is the most powerful thing we can do as parents, is the example that we set. Kids don't remember so much what we say. They remember what they saw us do.
Right on. All right. A couple of things I wanted to say about when parents do have something to report. This is something that I found out in the course of doing the story. The investigations sometimes take time. Back me up, Annie, if this is true, that sometimes there's not an immediate answer available, and that's really hard for parents to wait. They want their kid out of suffering immediately, but understand that they do have to talk to witnesses and get the story straight and figure out exactly what happened. And the other thing is that there are student privacy laws that sometimes they do keep schools from saying what the punishment is, especially if it's like suspension or expulsion. So a parent, like if a kid has in-school suspension, is this not true that they might not look like they're getting punished, and the parent of the child who was bullied is saying, hey, what's going on? But it's because of student privacy laws that not everything can be disclosed. You want to add anything to that?
Right, and generally when we first suspect that bullying or unkind behavior is going on, we always try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt at the beginning. So a lot of times I'll meet with the alleged bully, and when they're meeting with me, I'm not a discipline officer, I'm their counselor. And so that's a whole different relationship. And then I'll usually say, you're not in trouble right now. I'm giving you a heads up, that this is what's being said, this is what kids say they have witnessed. I'm just letting you know that this is what kids think is happening. And I don't think you meant for it to come across that way. Again, giving them an opportunity to fix it before it gets really bad. But I do say to them, if this comes up again, I'm not the person who's going to be talking to you. So then it will be a disciplinary issue. We say to our own children, I'm not going to tell you always how Sally got disciplined. That is between me and Sally. And it's the same with kids at school. We do not report to the parent of the other child how this other student was disciplined. That's private, and it's between us and that student's parents.
Okay.
So,
and
yeah.
are there any myths or misunderstandings about bullying that we need to address here? myths or misunderstandings about bullying?
I think we've talked about it, that it's kind of a hot word, and people, when they feel that their child is unhappy or being mistreated or being left out, that doesn't mean that bullying is happening. Bullying is ongoing over a long period of time. There's intention there. There's a power imbalance going on there. It needs to be, a pattern over a period of time. But it isn't okay for kids to be mean and hurtful and cruel. And we want to know that when that happens. We just may not use the bully word. We may say, that was really mean. And that's not okay. We don't tolerate kids being mean and hurtful.
And you also mentioned earlier before the chat, we were talking about consequences resulting from bullying when it's actually taking place. And there's a lot of extreme cases that get covered, but kind of the myths about bullying ending in school shootings or suicides. I mean, how common is that, and that personified view?
Well, and of course those events are just shattering, sad, terrible events, and it may be that bullying was somehow a part of those stories, but what we try to reassure kids is that those are not that common. Those are very uncommon events, and they are in a safe place, and we do want to hear them. It's important that they come forward and they talk to us and tell us if something is troubling them. Yeah, we just really try to diffuse that whole thinking about, just because somebody is unhappy or feeling picked on, that means we're going to have school violence. It's terrible when school violence happens.
Right, and you cut out for a minute. Are we talking about the incident today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because, and again, I'm drawing from this, stopbullying.gov, that, just because somebody commits suicide and maybe, mentions bullying in their note or whatever, there's not a causative relationship, and there's nothing to support that. So if you leap to that conclusion, it is not constructive and not helpful. And the same way with school violence. Let's see, I have actually some information. It says actually that a very small number of children who are bullied might retaliate through extreme behavior, but I think to reassure both children and parents to say that that is not a common outcome, as is, suicide is not a common outcome, and not to automatically connect the dots between those is a more constructive approach, is what I'm hearing. So, Rachel, are there any other questions out there that we need to add?
Kind of last-minute questions for either of you two, we can take them, but also, like you said, anyone that has questions that they want to ask privately or to think of later, they can email you and go from there as well. So, I think based on our readers' reactions, I don't know that we have too many other questions. Is there anything else that you think we haven't touched or that you want people to know before we think everyone?
I just want people to feel comfortable to come into the schools and help out. We can always use more volunteers, and I think that it's just refreshing. When people come in and volunteer in the schools, we hear them say, I just love these kids. So the majority of kids are happy and productive and have friends at school and are having a good time. But we want to hear if it's not that way.
Right on.
And
Very
so the best
good.
way to do that is
Contact if it's an elementary child, contact the teacher probably. But at the junior high or high school level, you probably do need to contact the counselor, and then we can investigate and try and find out what's really going on.
just to kind of recap, people's resources and where to go first.
Right. Yeah, the school counselor, that's part of our specialty, is that we have a lot of resources, and if we don't have it at our fingertips, we'll find out.
Well, I think it's after 7 o'clock now, and we'll go ahead and wrap up. And thank you everyone for participating and talking with us and being patient with technology as it is. So thanks so much, Chris and Reed. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks, Annie, for joining us. I really appreciate it, and thanks to everybody who signed on today. I hope we can continue this conversation.
My pleasure.
Not tonight, but just in general.
All right. Well, have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.